If my husband had come home 20 minutes earlier, he would have smelled the garlic before he saw the candles, and everything would have ended differently. I remember the exact moment I decided to cook. It was 10:17 in the morning on February 14th. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Valentine's Day used to make me nervous in a sweet way, the kind of nervous that comes with anticipation. A surprise bouquet, a reservation somewhere too expensive, a last-minute gift hidden in the closet. This year, there was nothing hidden, no reservation, no bouquet, no question about dinner plans. Daniel, my husband, had left for work at 7:40 a.m., like he always did. He kissed my forehead without really looking at me. His lips were warm. His mind was somewhere else. "Busy day," he said. He didn't mention Valentine's Day. I didn't remind him. Soon after 13 years of marriage, you learned the difference between forgetting and choosing not to remember. By 10:17 a.m., I had already cleaned the kitchen twice. I opened the fridge and stared at what we had: cherry tomatoes, fresh basil, a block of Parmesan I'd been saving, salmon fillets, cream, lemons. It wasn't a special grocery trip. It was just food. But something in me decided it would become more. I took out my phone. I typed a message. "Are you free tonight?" I didn't add a heart. I didn't add a smile. I didn't mention the date. He replied 3 minutes later. "For you?" "Always." I locked my phone. That was the moment. Not dramatic, not reckless, just quiet. The man I texted was named Adrian. And my husband hates him. Not in the exaggerated way men sometimes claim to hate someone. Not playful jealousy. Real hate. The kind that settles into the jaw and tightens it permanently. Adrian used to be Daniel's closest friend. Best man at our wedding. The person who toasted our future and called us inevitable. Until 3 years ago. 3 years ago, something broke between them. It wasn't about me. At least, not at first. It was about money. A business idea. An investment Daniel believed in. Adrian didn't. They argued. Pride got involved. Words were said that couldn't be unsaid. They stopped speaking. Daniel framed it as betrayal. Adrian framed it as caution. I stood in the middle, like I always do. Not choosing sides. Just absorbing silence. After the fight, Daniel erased Adrian from our lives. No more dinners. No more weekend visits. No more shared holidays. Adrian disappeared the way people do when pride becomes more important than history. But I didn't hate him. I never did. Because during those 13 years of marriage, there were nights when Daniel was emotionally absent, working late, traveling, exhausted, and Adrian would still text to check if I needed help fixing something around the house, if I was okay, if I wanted company when Daniel was away. It was always respectful, never inappropriate, almost annoyingly decent. When this friendship ended, Daniel told me I should cut contact too. "Out of respect," he said. I nodded. But I never promised, because respect should not require erasing kindness. The first time Adrian and I spoke after the fallout was accidental. I ran into him at a bookstore. He looked thinner, tired. We stood between shelves, pretending not to recognize each other until it became ridiculous. "Hi," he said. "Hi." We talked for 10 minutes about neutral things, weather, books, how time moves faster after 40. When I got home, I didn't tell Daniel. Not because I was hiding something romantic, because I was tired of conflict. Sometimes silence feels easier than explanation. That's how it started. Occasional texts, then coffee once every few months, always in public, always during the day, always careful. Nothing physical ever happened, not even a touch that lingered too long. But emotional lines are harder to measure. By the time February 14th arrived this year, Adrian had become something I didn't know how to name. Not a lover, not exactly a friend. He was the person who listened without interrupting, who remembered small details, who noticed when my voice sounded different. Daniel used to notice those things, before work became his permanent third partner. So, at 10:17 a.m., when I decided to cook, it wasn't about seduction. It was about being seen. I drove to the market around noon. I bought fresh flowers. White ones, not red. Red felt like a lie. I chose a bottle of wine Adrian once mentioned liking. I don't even drink much. But I remember things. That's my flaw. Or maybe my gift. Back home, I cleaned again. Prepared the salmon with lemon zest and cracked pepper. Made a slow cream sauce the way my grandmother taught me. Patient, steady stirring, low heat. I chopped basil carefully, inhaling the scent like it was oxygen. I set the table for two. Cloth napkins, real plates, candles. It looked like something from the early years of my marriage. The years when Daniel would come home early just to sit in the kitchen while I cooked. He used to stand behind me, wrap his arms around my waist, and say, "You don't have to try so hard." I never knew if that meant I was trying too hard or that he didn't want me to stop. By 6:45 p.m., everything was ready. Adrian texted, "Parking now." My heart didn't race. That's the part people misunderstand. If this were passion, it would feel explosive. It didn't. It felt steady, like relief. He knocked gently, always gently. I opened the door. He wore a dark coat and that slightly awkward smile he gets when he's unsure of his welcome. "Happy Valentine's Day," he said. There was hesitation in his voice. I stepped aside. "Come in." He paused when he saw the table. "You did all this?" "It's just dinner," I said, but we both knew it wasn't. He set down a small paper bag. "I didn't know if this was appropriate," he said. Inside were pastries from the bakery I love, the one Daniel never remembers the name of. We moved into the kitchen. There was a strange tenderness in the air. Not sexual, just intimate. Two people aware they are standing on fragile ground. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. It wasn't about morality. It was about consequence. "I'm sure I needed tonight," I replied. He nodded. We sat down. For a few minutes, we just ate. The candles flickered. The room glowed softly. Outside, the neighborhood was probably filled with husbands arriving home with roses. Mine would be working late, or so he said. Adrian poured wine carefully. "You know he'd hate this," he said gently. "I know." "And you're okay with that?" I thought about it. About loyalty, about loneliness, about how resentment grows when ignored. "I'm tired of being loyal to silence," I said. He didn't answer immediately, because there's no easy response to that. Dinner stretched into conversation about regret, about aging, about how sometimes the wrong fight costs you the right people. He apologized again for this business fallout with Daniel, not defensively, sincerely. "He was my brother," Adrian said. "And now?" "Now I don't know how to fix it." I watched him as he spoke. There was no manipulation in his eyes, no hidden agenda, just sadness. And maybe that's what made it dangerous. Not lust, not revenge, just emotional safety. At 7:52 p.m., my phone buzzed. Daniel. Running late. Don't wait up. I stared at the message. Adrian watched my face. You should answer, he said. I will. But I didn't. Not right away. Instead, I looked at the table, at the salmon, the wine, the white flowers, and I realized something uncomfortable. This dinner wasn't just about Adrian. It was about testing a boundary, seeing how far loneliness can stretch before it snaps. At 8:03 p.m., there was a sound outside. A car door, not Adrian's. He had parked farther down. Headlights flashed briefly across the window. Adrian froze. That's not. I stood up slowly. Because I knew that engine. After 13 years, you recognize the sound of your own life pulling into the driveway. Daniel never said he'd be early. He never said he'd be home before 9. But sometimes fate doesn't need permission. So the front door handle moved. Locked. I had locked it. Adrian stood halfway between the table and the kitchen, not panicking, but aware. The knock wasn't gentle, it was firm. Why is the door locked? Daniel's voice came through the wood. My heart didn't shatter. It slowed. And in that slow, suspended second before I walked to open it, I understood something clearly. Tonight was never about cheating. It was about confrontation. And I had just set the stage. I reached for the handle. When I opened the door, the first thing Daniel noticed was the smell. Garlic, butter, wine, not suspicion, not betrayal, just scent. His eyes moved past me, over my shoulder, into the soft glow of the dining room. Candles, 2 glasses, 2 plates. He didn't speak immediately, and that silence, that stretched, fragile silence, felt louder than shouting. Why is Adrian's car down the street? His voice was calm. Too calm. I hadn't even realized he'd seen it, because of course he would notice. When you hate someone, you memorize their details. He's here, I said. There are moments in marriage when you can still choose denial. This wasn't one of them. Daniel stepped inside slowly. He didn't slam the door, didn't raise his voice. He simply took off his coat and placed it carefully on the chair by the entrance. The kind of careful movement that means someone is holding themselves together by force. Adrian stood in the dining room, not hiding, not advancing, just present. I watched the 2 men look at each other for the first time in 3 years. History filled the space between them like smoke. So this is what you're doing now? Daniel asked quietly. He wasn't asking Adrian, he was asking me. I invited him for dinner, I said, on Valentine's Day. It wasn't a question. No, I answered, a beat. Yes, because truth is rarely one word. Daniel laughed once. Not amused, just breath leaving his body too fast. Of all days. He walked into the dining room, looked at the table, touched the back of the chair across from Adrian, as if confirming it was real. You cooked, he said to me. I did. For him. For us. That word changed something. Daniel's eyes sharpened. There is no us with him. There used to be, I said softly. Adrian shifted slightly. I can leave, he offered. Daniel's gaze snapped to him. No, Daniel said, and that surprised all of us. No, he repeated, calmer. If we're doing this, we're doing it properly. He pulled out the 3rd chair from the kitchen, placed it at the table, sat down. The candles flickered between them like witnesses. I stood there for a moment, unsure whether this was destruction or an opportunity. Then I sat too. 3 people, 1 dinner, 1 holiday built on romance, now hosting something far more fragile. Daniel poured himself wine without asking. Drank, not aggressively, just steadily. So, he said, looking at Adrian, you're back. I never meant to disappear, Adrian replied. Daniel's jaw tightened. You invested in that company, knowing I couldn't afford to lose. I told you it was unstable. You told me after I signed. I told you before you doubled down. The old argument rose quickly, like it had been waiting for air. I watched them, not as enemies, but as men who once loved each other like brothers. I didn't invite him to reopen that, I said quietly. Daniel turned to me. Then why did you invite him? That was the question. The real one. Why did I cook salmon with lemon zest and light candles on a night my husband assumed would be ordinary? Why did I text the man he hates and say, "Are you free tonight?" It would be easier to say loneliness, easier to say neglect, but the truth was slower, more uncomfortable. I invited him because I miss who we were, I said. Daniel blinked. We? Yes, the three of us, before pride became louder than friendship. Adrian looked down at his glass. Daniel leaned back in his chair. So this is therapy now? He asked. No, I replied. This is honesty. Silence again. But different this time. Less explosive. More reflective. Daniel looked around the room. At the flowers. White, not red. I forgot it was Valentine's Day, he said suddenly. The admission landed heavier than accusation. I know, I answered. I had meetings. I know. And that's why you called him? I shook my head. I called him because he answers. That hurt him. I saw it. Not as anger, as realization. Adrian spoke carefully. I never crossed a line. Daniel's eyes hardened. You're here. That's a line. I'm here because she asked. And you never thought to tell me? Adrian hesitated. No. Why? Because you haven't wanted to hear my voice for 3 years. The words were not aggressive, just factual. Daniel stood abruptly, walked to the window, looked out into the dark street. I built everything thinking loyalty mattered, he said quietly. And it does, I replied. Then what is this? I inhaled slowly. This is me refusing to live inside your war. He turned. My war? Yes. Your fight. Your silence. Your decision to erase someone without allowing space for repair. And you get to decide that repair? No, but I get to decide whether I'm allowed to speak to someone who has never harmed me. The room felt smaller, but clearer. Daniel's anger wasn't explosive. It was wounded. You should have told me, he said finally. He was right. I know, I whispered. That was the part I couldn't defend. Secrecy creates shadows, even when nothing physical happens. Adrian stood slowly. I don't want to come between you, he said. You already did, Daniel replied. But there was less fire now. More fatigue. I realized something then. This dinner wasn't about choosing between two men. It was about confronting distance. The distance in my marriage. The distance between former friends. The distance between who we were and who we became. Daniel returned to the table, sat down again. This isn't about business anymore, he said. No, Adrian agreed. It's about trust. I felt the weight of that word. Trust. Not betrayal, not cheating. Trust. I didn't sleep with him, I said quietly. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. I didn't ask. But you're thinking it. He didn't deny it. Adrian spoke again, steady. I would never disrespect your marriage. Daniel let out a tired breath. You already have, by existing in it. That sentence lingered. Because it was partially true. My emotional presence can feel more threatening than physical absence. I needed someone to talk to, I said. You had me. Did I? The question cut deeper than accusation. Daniel looked at me differently then, not as a wife betraying him, but as a woman he hadn't fully seen. When was the last time you asked how I was? I continued softly. He didn't answer. When was the last time we had dinner without phones? Silence. When was the last time you noticed I stopped playing piano? That made him look up. You stopped? 3 months ago. He hadn't noticed. That wasn't cruelty, it was distraction. But distraction can wound just as deeply. Adrian stepped back slightly, sensing this wasn't his space anymore. I think I should go, he said again. Daniel didn't stop him this time. Adrian looked at me before leaving. There was no romance in his expression, just concern, and maybe regret. When the door closed behind him, the house felt different. Not emptier, just exposed. Daniel and I sat at the table, surrounded by food meant for two. I hate him, Daniel said quietly. I know. But I don't hate you. That mattered. I don't love him, I said. I know. We looked at each other in a way we hadn't in months, directly, without distraction. Why didn't you just tell me you were lonely? He asked. Because I didn't want to sound ungrateful. For what? For a stable life. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Stability isn't the same as connection. I nodded. And I miss connection. The candles were burning low now, wax pooling around the base. Valentine's Day reduced to melted edges. Daniel reached across the table slowly. Not dramatic, just intentional. He took my hand. I don't want to lose you, he said. You're not losing me, I replied, but we are drifting. That word was more honest than betrayal. Drifting. He squeezed my fingers lightly. We need help, he said, not angrily, not defensively, just plainly. And maybe that was the real reason this dinner had happened. Not to cheat, not to provoke, but to force a conversation we had both avoided. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about meeting him before, I said. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to. We sat there for a long time after that. Not fixing everything, just acknowledging it. Later that night, after the dishes were half washed and the candles extinguished, Daniel asked one more question. Would you have crossed the line? I thought carefully. No, I said. Why? Because I wanted to be seen, not replaced. He nodded slowly. That distinction mattered. Valentine's Day didn't end in divorce. It didn't end in passion. It ended in honesty. But honesty, when delayed, always costs something. And as I lay in bed that night beside my husband, closer than we had been in months, I understood that the most dangerous affairs aren't physical. They are the quiet ones. The ones built from conversations your partner doesn't hear. The ones fueled by feeling invisible. And those are the hardest to confess. 3 days after Valentine's Day, my husband asked me a question I didn't expect. Did you love him? Not. Do you love him? Did. Past tense. As if whatever existed had already ended. We were sitting in the kitchen again. No candles this time, no wine. Just morning light and the sound of the coffee machine finishing its cycle. I didn't answer immediately, because the honest answer wasn't simple. I don't know, I said finally. Daniel studied my face, searching for signs of softness, hesitation, guilt. Not knowing is worse than yes, he replied quietly. Maybe he was right. But emotions don't always come with labels attached. After that night, Adrian didn't text. I didn't either. There was no dramatic goodbye. No secret longing message, just silence. Intentional, respectful, heavy. Daniel noticed. You haven't spoken to him? No. Because of me? Because of us. That seemed to matter. But it didn't erase the crack that had formed. Marriage counseling was Daniel's idea. We started the following week. Dr. Keller's office smelled like lavender and old books, soft chairs, neutral colors, tissues placed strategically within reach. The first session was polite, careful. We spoke about work stress, communication gaps, routine. We didn't say Adrian's name. In the second session, Dr. Keller asked directly, "Was there an affair?" Daniel looked at me before answering. "No," he said. The therapist didn't nod in relief. She tilted her head slightly. "What do you define as an affair?" That question sat between us like an exposed wire. Daniel spoke first. Physical, I spoke second. Emotional. We didn't look at each other when we said it. Dr. Keller folded her hands. Both definitions can damage trust, she said gently. Daniel exhaled slowly. I didn't touch him, I said. But you cooked for him, Daniel replied. It wasn't about food. It was about intention, about the way I chose another man to share something intimate, something traditionally reserved for romance. Dr. Keller asked me why that dinner mattered. I thought about it carefully. Because I wanted someone to show up, I said. And your husband doesn't show up? She asked. He shows up physically, I replied, but not emotionally. Daniel winced slightly at that, not defensively, hurt. Is that fair? Dr. Keller asked him. Daniel didn't argue. No, he admitted, but I didn't realize how far we'd drifted. Dr. Keller leaned back. Drift happens quietly. Affairs, emotional or physical, are usually symptoms, not causes. That sentence changed something, because suddenly Adrian wasn't the villain, and I wasn't the traitor. We were symptoms of distance, of neglect, of pride. After the third session, Daniel asked if I missed Adrian. The question came while we were folding laundry. Ordinary life, extraordinary tension. Yes, I said honestly. He nodded once. I miss him too, he admitted. That surprised me. You do? He was my best friend. That truth had been buried under anger for years. And you never tried to fix it, I said. He looked at me sharply. Neither did you. He was right. I stayed neutral because neutrality felt safe. But neutrality sometimes becomes silent agreement with division. 2 weeks later, Adrian called. Not me, Daniel. I only found out because Daniel told me. He wants to meet, Daniel said one evening. My heart skipped. Not romantically, but anxiously. Why? To apologize. Chant properly. And? Daniel stared at the floor for a moment. I don't know if I'm ready. That night, I realized something important. The dinner hadn't just exposed loneliness in my marriage. It had exposed unresolved grief between two men who once trusted each other deeply. Valentine's Day was never about romance. It was about fracture. Daniel met Adrian at a cafe the following Saturday. I didn't go. I stayed home, waiting, not pacing, not obsessing, just aware that something fragile was happening without me. When Daniel came back, his expression was unreadable. Well? I asked. He removed his coat slowly. We talked. About? Everything. He sat down across from me. He admitted he was arrogant, Daniel said. Said he should have fought harder for our friendship instead of walking away. And you? I admitted I was stubborn. I waited. Are you friends again? I asked carefully. Daniel shook his head. Not like before. That was honest. But we're not enemies anymore. Something in my chest loosened, not because I wanted Adrian back in our lives, but because hatred is exhausting, and I had been living inside its shadow for 3 years. That evening, Daniel did something small. He asked if I wanted to play piano. I stared at him. You remember? You said you stopped. I hesitated. I'm rusty. That's okay. So I sat at the piano for the first time in months. My fingers trembled slightly over the keys. The first notes were uneven, uncertain, but Daniel stayed in the room, not on his phone, not distracted, just listening. After I finished, he said something simple. I missed that sound. He wasn't talking about the piano. Over the next few weeks, we moved differently, more intentionally. Dinner without phones twice a week, walks after work, awkward conversations about needs we'd both ignored. But healing isn't linear. One evening, Daniel asked the question again. If I hadn't come home early that night, what would have happened? I answered without dramatics. We would have eaten, talked. He would have left. And nothing else? No. He searched my face. You're sure? Yes. But certainty doesn't erase imagination. And imagination is cruel. There were moments I caught Daniel watching me, not suspiciously, but thoughtfully, as if recalibrating who I was. Trust rebuilds slowly, like bone after fracture. You can walk on it, but you remember the break. Adrian and I eventually exchanged one final message. I'm glad he met you, I wrote. Me too, he replied. Take care of yourself. You too. No hidden meaning, no longing, just closure. Months passed. Spring replaced winter. Valentine's Day faded into memory, not as scandal, but as turning point. One night, Daniel surprised me. He cooked, badly, overcooked chicken, burnt sauce, but he tried. We sat at the table, just us, no tension, no third chair. I was scared, he admitted. Of what? Losing you without realizing I was losing you. I reached for his hand. You almost did. That wasn't cruelty, it was truth. And truth, spoken gently, can heal. Do you regret inviting him? Daniel asked. I thought about it for a long time. Regret is complicated. I regret the secrecy, I said, not the wake-up call. He nodded slowly. That dinner forced us to look at what we were avoiding. Yes. And if I hadn't come home early? I smiled faintly. You would still have come home eventually. Because avoidance doesn't erase consequence. It only delays it. Valentine's Day taught me something uncomfortable. You don't need to sleep with someone to betray a marriage. But you also don't need to betray a marriage to save it. Sometimes the line you almost cross is the one that makes you stop drifting. Daniel and I are not perfect now. We still argue. We still get distracted by work. But there's a difference. We notice. We check in. We ask harder questions sooner. And every February 14th now feels quieter. Not dramatic. Not symbolic. Just intentional. Last night, Daniel asked me one final thing before we went to bed. If he called again, would you answer? I looked at him honestly. Yes. His jaw tightened slightly. But not in secret, I added. That mattered, because secrecy was the real betrayal, not dinner, not candles, not salmon with lemon zest. Marriage doesn't collapse in a single night. It erodes slowly. And sometimes it takes something shocking, something controversial, to force two people to admit they've been lonely in the same house. I didn't cook that dinner to replace my husband. I cooked it because I wanted to be seen. And in the end, It was my husband who finally looked. A year later, I cooked salmon again. Not because it was Valentine's Day, because I wanted to see if the kitchen still felt dangerous. It didn't. That surprised me. No, for months after that night, every small ritual carried weight. Lighting a candle felt symbolic. Pouring wine felt loaded. Even chopping garlic reminded me of the moment the front door handle turned and my life split into before and after. But time does something quiet to memory. It softens the sharp edges without erasing the shape. Daniel was setting the table while I stirred the sauce. No tension in the room. No third plate hidden in the cabinet. Just us. "Smells good," he said. And he meant it. That was the difference. Before, he would have said it while checking his phone. Now he stayed, watched, asked if I needed help. The change wasn't dramatic. It was consistent. And consistency is far more intimate than passion. People imagine that after a near affair, a marriage either collapses or transforms into something cinematic. Grand gestures, desperate romance, constant reassurance. That's not what happened to us. We became quieter, more deliberate. We learned the art of checking in before resentment builds. But healing does not mean forgetting. Sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if Daniel hadn't come home early that night. Not in a longing way, in a curiosity way. Would I have felt guilt after Adrian left? Would I have confessed voluntarily? Or would the secret have grown roots? I don't know. And that uncertainty keeps me humble. 3 months after the anniversary of that dinner, Adrian got engaged. I found out through mutual friends. Daniel told me, not casually, carefully. "I thought you should know," he said. I searched his face for jealousy. There was none, only transparency. "How do you feel?" he asked. I considered the question honestly. "Relieved," I said. And I was. Because whatever fragile emotional thread had existed between Adrian and me no longer carried weight. It had served its purpose. It exposed something broken in my marriage. And then it dissolved. Daniel surprised me again that night. "I called him," he said. "You did?" "Yes, to congratulate him." My chest tightened slightly. "And?" "And it wasn't awkward." He paused. We talked for 20 minutes. I didn't know what to say. The two men who once couldn't stand being in the same room had found neutral ground. Not best friends again, but not enemies. Time had sanded down pride. "Do you miss him?" I asked gently. Daniel thought for a moment. "I miss who we were at 30, he said. That answer was wiser than a simple yes or no. We all miss younger versions of ourselves, less cautious, less wounded, less aware of how fragile everything is. A week later, Adrian and his fiancée invited us to dinner. The invitation felt surreal. Daniel showed it to me like a document requiring mutual approval. "We don't have to go," he said. "Do you want to?" "I think so." So we went. Not on Valentine's Day, not on any symbolic date, just a regular Saturday. Adrian's fiancée, Clara, was warm, grounded. She knew about the business fallout. She knew about the Valentine's dinner. Nothing was hidden. And that transparency changed everything. At one point during the evening, Clara asked casually, "So what really happened on that Valentine's Day?" The table grew still. 4 adults. 4 different perspectives. Daniel looked at me. I looked at him. Then I answered. "I was lonely," I said. Not dramatically, not defensively. Not unloved, just unseen. Clara nodded slowly. "That's honest." Adrian added quietly, "We were all stubborn." Daniel didn't argue. He reached for his glass. I almost lost my marriage because I thought being busy was the same as being responsible. That was the closest he had ever come to publicly acknowledging his part. And strangely, hearing him say it in front of Adrian healed something I didn't know was still tender. Later that night, as we drove home, Daniel squeezed my hand at a red light. "I'm glad you opened the door," he said. I knew what he meant. Not just the front door, the emotional one. Because if I hadn't invited Adrian that night, if Daniel hadn't come home early, if confrontation hadn't happened when it did, we might still be drifting silently, comfortable, distant, polite. Instead, we were aware. Awareness is uncomfortable, but it is alive. On our 14th anniversary, Daniel asked me a question I didn't expect. "Do you think we would have survived if I hadn't walked in that night?" I didn't answer immediately. "I think we would have lasted," I said carefully, "but I don't know if we would have survived." There's a difference. Lasting means staying together. Surviving means growing. That dinner forced growth, not because of betrayal, but because of exposure. Exposure of loneliness, of ego, of neglected attention. People love dramatic stories about infidelity. They want clear villains, clear victims, clear lines crossed. But real marriages don't fracture in obvious ways. They erode quietly, through missed conversations, through tired kisses, through assuming tomorrow will fix what today ignored. Adrian was never the love of my life. He was a mirror. He reflected the parts of me that felt unheard. And instead of smashing the mirror, I had to examine what it showed. Daniel did too. We still argue. We still have weeks where work consumes him. I still have moments where I crave more conversation than he offers. But now we speak sooner, before resentment hardens, before silence becomes strategy. Last Valentine's Day, Daniel came home early. Not with roses, not with jewelry, just early. He cooked, still badly, but intentionally. Halfway through dinner, he smiled at me. "No surprise guests tonight?" he asked lightly. I smiled back. "So, not unless you count honesty." He laughed, and that laugh felt earned. After dinner, he cleared the plates without being asked. Small gestures, consistent ones. Later in bed, he whispered something unexpected. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not leaving when you could have." I turned toward him in the dark. "I never wanted to leave," I said. "I wanted to be noticed." He exhaled slowly. "I notice now." And that was enough. Sometimes I think about the version of myself at 10:17 a.m., standing in front of the fridge, deciding to text Adrian. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't immoral. She was tired of invisibility. I don't judge her. I understand her. But I'm grateful she was interrupted. Because interruption saved us. Valentine's Day used to symbolize romance. Then it symbolized confrontation. Now it symbolizes attention. The deliberate act of showing up before someone else has to. If there's a lesson in this, it isn't about cheating. It isn't about temptation. It's about drift, and how easy it is to mistake stability for connection. I cooked a romantic dinner on Valentine's Day for the man my husband hates. But I didn't lose my marriage. I nearly lost the illusion that it was fine. And sometimes, losing an illusion is the only way to save what's real. If Daniel had come home 20 minutes later, nothing physical would have happened. But something emotional might have rooted deeper. Instead, he walked in. He saw the candles. He smelled the garlic. He chose to sit down instead of storm out. And we chose to speak instead of hide. That choice, more than any dinner, is what kept us together. Now, when I cook salmon, it's just salmon. No symbolism, no danger, just food. And sometimes that ordinariness feels like the greatest romance of all.